Let's see. All right. You guys here? Sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties. Hey, thanks, Mercer. How's it going, dude? Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Oh, good. What's going on? Okay, good. Just let me know. Man, you've been busy. I was gonna ask you, Mercer, have you read any of Freud's work? Because I just read his essay on the superego, and um, I've been thinking it might actually be a real part of the type psyche, as I know Chase kind of presented it that way, but I don't think he really attached it to Freud in his explanations. But all right, let's see. It's the ego and the id essay. It's 60, 70 pages. It's not too bad. It's pretty good. Yeah, they broke up over religion, but Freud does seem to have a model of the psyche. It's harder to graft onto the types, I think, but um, his is more like capturing the animal side, and then the probably an ISTJ, if not an INFP. But he does seem kind of concrete to me, but he's sort of tricky because extrovert thinking, into extrovert intuition types. Basically, the STJs who are concrete are can look abstract, but I think ISTJ, he seems kind of wrathful. He seems like a um, yeah, like he's trying to abstract. I would like to know, how does psychopath narcissist can be dealt with the personalities framework? Concrete but big on psychology. Yes, I agree. All right. Narcissists and psychopaths in type framework. Well, I mean, if you can avoid dealing with them, I would recommend that. First of all, but if you're talking specifically about types, um, it's hard to answer that with just types without talking about other clinical things, which I'm probably not qualified to talk about. But I can talk about my experience with them, which is um, they often play this game where they'll give you something and then they want something in return and they won't necessarily say it. And then there's kind of a slow manipulation, gaslighting, things like that. Um, with types specifically, I mean, I've seen, I can talk about the types I've seen it the most with, which are the ENTP, unfortunately. Um, Can you give me a more specific question, Theus, or Theus, however you say your name? Give me a more specific question with that, and I'll try to answer it. Yeah, I'm talking about ENTPs. He could be an INTJ Mercer. That is possible, especially if Jung really is an INTP. That would make sense of their collaboration. I think ISTJs and INTPs can get along. Yeah, I am. I am. Well, he's asking about psychopaths and narcissists. Um, have the most reference points with that with ENTPs. Is there such a possibility of the parent function being overused to the point of causing damage, like having to bear too much responsibility in childhood and early adulthood? Yes, this is the burnout of like the ego. This is the burnout of the type. This is where you see people who are just all work and no play. They're not really fun to be around. Um, I do believe that the parent function drains energy. I think it's more energy efficient than some of the other functions that drain energy. The problem with responsibility is that it makes the ego feel like they're walking the higher road, they're sacrificing, but they don't realize, a lot of those people don't realize that play is actually an essential part of being responsible. Like, you can't be as helpful as you think you can be unless you're a little playful as well. So, um, yes. Do I have two streams going? Why is too much responsibility a bad thing at a young age? That's a good question. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing at a young age. I think it's like if your type, your parent function is your second function, the function that's are usually our source of responsibility. So in early life, developing the parent function is extremely important. It's usually when someone gets older into adulthood where they are so responsible and so sacrificial that they don't play anymore, and it actually causes a lot of burnout and a lot of pain. And they start to deceive themselves where they think they're being responsible and helpful, but instead of that, they're actually not seeing the whole picture. Because in order to see the whole picture, you need to play. You need to allow your child function to play a bit. So I would say responsibility is only really a bad thing at the very extreme. At the very extreme, but very good early on, I would say. Yes, I agree. Balance. All right. For example, which personalities does that happen most often, and if there a reason is there a reason for that? So to be honest, I see it most with the ENTP. I see it second most with the INTJ. Um, you would think the ENFP would be like second or third with some of those, narcissistic traits, but I actually haven't seen that as much with the ENFP. They can be kind of predatory with like ripping people off, the ENFPs, but the ENTP for some reason, I wouldn't say that most ENTPs are that way, but the ones who display narcissistic traits often are ENTPs, at least from what I've seen. I don't know exactly why that is. It's a good question. I think any hero and Effie child combined want to be wanted and be the most appreciated and want to praise for that. I also think if you explore narcissism, it is actually a very unpleasant internal state. Like they suffer a lot within themselves, even though they don't always look like that. There's this clip on Lex Friedman's podcast where the psychiatrist or psychologist is explaining narcissism. If you want to look that up, it's just about a 20-minute clip. It's the best explanation of narcissism I've ever seen. Swinging the axis one way can cause problems, correct? Yes. Any tips on how to see when a young adult child is ready for more responsibility? So I talk about that in the child function because all the child functions, our third functions, can eventually become responsible. The our third function, it aspires to become like a parent, to become more parental. So, what I talk about in that video is how you raise a child function, like in our minds, is by giving it a defined area to be responsible for. Meaning, I want you to go cut that part of the grass, or I want you to go build that part in the sand. So if by that logic, then giving them, once they do well within that contained area, then giving them more areas and then more areas, and then loosening the restraints. So it's a combination of giving them a constricted area, giving a child function a constricted area, and then giving very specific expectations of I want you to do this or that, and then letting them do the rest of it. That's what I'd explain in the child video. I think that applies to normal children too, not just the child function. Agreed. A few bad apples ruin it, yes. So Mercer says about ENTPs or about narcissists, I think because they are very quick-witted, they don't care of the things they need to in life, so they end up manipulating to get by. Yeah, they're so skilled with their intelligence, the ENTP, they're really smart, but they often are very smart, but they really struggle with the little things. So some of them take that more expedient path where they think they can charm their way into getting whatever they want, and then unfortunately avoid responsibility. They get really restless though. ENTPs, it's really hard for them to sit still. I think INTJs, yeah, I have seen that with their behavior, Mercer, the INTJs and ENTPs acting like they think they're special. I think that's more of the INTJs. ENTPs, um, it depends how you define special. I mean, with TE Critic, if they think everyone else is stupid, um, then they can easily feel superior. All right. Ooh, did I miss anyone? Theus, I think it's Theus. Did you have a particular example in mind about that? About what types deal with that the most? Yeah, I think that's right, Mercer. FI child. Yeah, the thing about the ENTP too is, um, the ones what I would watch out for is the ones who look larger than life, who present themselves in a way that they're like that they can do anything or they think anything's possible. The ones who um, don't present themselves with any limitations, I think those are the ones to be very careful about. Because as much as people think that ENFPs are the ones that are too good to be true, I have not found that to be the case as much. I've found that some ENTPs present themselves as like the ideal, and those are the ones who are often anything but. Personally, I've met two ESTJs as psychopaths. Interesting. Yeah, it's if you're talking about the ESTJ or the ENTJ, it's interesting if you compare like psychopathy to narcissism. I'm not an expert in the psychiatric stuff, so I don't want to claim to be, but Effie Demon can be pretty rough with that stuff. Should I embrace the nature of my constant inner critic voice when trying to take a certain path in life, or is it the STH, the Sith I need to fix? I'm not sure exactly what you're saying, but with the critic, no, I mean, if you let the critic run your life, something, if you let the critic run your life, it's going to consume you with all the criticism. So learning to listen to it, learning to hear its voice as part of multiple perspectives you take, that's very important. But the crit, if you just rely on the critic, it's going to crush you or other people because it doesn't have a lot of nice things to say. It does want to be listened to, and I would try and find out the motive of why it's bringing up certain criticism. So if it's telling you that path is bad or you shouldn't want that, um, if you're like a creative person engaging with that in like an active imagination way, like asking, okay, why do you not want that? Get into a conversation with it, and the critic will reveal a motive underneath, and that's what you can take and weigh out for yourself. That's what you want to get to with the critic. Okay. What are some examples of FI child of the INTJ seeming affiliative, or why does their FI child seem affiliative? Yeah, I said something similar to that in the INTJ video. I said that I believe INTJs are the secret idealists of the pragmatists. So some INTJs rely more on their FI. Their FI is more developed. So they lead with the more moral measurement and less of a practical measurement. So those INTJs, I think, are the ones who seem more affiliative. They're also, if they are part of an organization, if they value their position, or if they're like a professor or an admin or something to that nature, um, they want to follow the rules because that's how they keep some of their authority. So depending on the context of where they're working, what they're doing, they can look like someone who's trying to follow the rules more. It's mostly FI and TE though. Is it easier to type younger people or older people based on maturity of functions or dominant? Because introversion versus extroversion can develop by age. That's a great question. Um, it's easier to type younger people past a certain age. I think it's hard. It can be hard to type children. I think you should be careful when you type children. But like adolescent to like early mid adulthood, I think that's pretty. Particularly later, I would say like late teenager to early adulthood. That's when it's I think about easiest to type. Older people can be very hard to type, especially if they've lived a full life, especially if they've gone through some hard things and developed through that. Old people can be very hard to type. You got to be careful. You got to be careful with that. That's a very, very good question. What is the cognitive function that is related to self-esteem? Related to self-esteem. Well, the only one that's really related to that in my mind is FI, of how do I feel about myself, how do I value myself. Now, I think introverted sensing can become trained in the habits to develop a self-esteem mindset of what are the habits I've done to think about myself in a certain way. But that's more passive, it more holds the habits. I think FI is most related to that. So wherever your FI function is, that's probably going to be your default relationship to self-esteem. The problem is, though, with like an INFP or an ISFP, FI hero, you might think they have great self-esteem. If they've been criticized their whole life and told they suck, that cannot help but seep into their FI. So TFI is probably the most direct way of that. As FI hero, I see myself getting along better with FE parent than FE hero. Why might that be? That doesn't fit the picture of compatibility theory that I'm familiar with. Okay, let me read that again. As FI hero, I see myself getting along better with FE parent. Well, the first thing that comes to mind with FE parent, we won't blow smoke up as much about your own worth or your own values. We may do that a bit, but we're more, I think our praise for FI heroes is a little more measured than an FE hero. Like if an ENFJ and an INFJ interact with an INFP, I think the INFJ, the praise that they bring to the INFP will be more grounded, and less aggressive. I feel a similar thing to what you're saying, but in the inverse, I get along a little better with FI heroes usually than FI parents. Yeah, I think there's a lot more to compatibility than just, that golden pair stuff. That's a base layer, but I wouldn't say that's the end. Okay, Mercer said, I find those monks hard to type. Okay, FE hero like a shotgun, FE parent more selective. Yes, FE parent is more cautious and careful about how it interacts with you. I think if you're dealing with, if you're as an FI hero are dealing with painful emotions, FE parent is better at walking with you through that usually. FE hero is better at like fixing it really, really quick. I think FE parent is more naturally gifted at holding space when it chooses to be. So Theus, with your question about esteem, if we go back to like the ENTP, an extroverted feeler is trying to pull in esteem from other people from FI. So if they are a manipulative FE user, they're going to try and extract as much FI from people as possible because that is how they build up their own sense of worth or esteem. What are your tips to develop the inferior SE as an INFJ? Yeah, there's a lot with that. I think the first thing for both INJs is the humility of the NI hero. Of the first thing we need to do with SE inferior is realize the limitations of our hero of SE inferior. So if we want to do something, if we want to get good at something, it's the acceptance that we can't do it the way we want to do it right now. We are not skilled enough, and that we want to get better. And it's the relinquishment of that outcome that says, I don't have to be as great as I want to be right now because that's just not the reality. And then SE inferior has to look at a couple small pieces. Okay, what is the first couple things I could do to really improve here? And then going into the practice of those small things. Now it depends what exactly you're referring to with the inferior. If you're talking about like social anxiety, like dealing with people, that's a little different. I think looking like in a very technical sense, if you're in an environment, instead of like shutting off from it, which SE inferior often does, taking in small parts of it, of literally like forcing yourself to look at a small piece of the environment or a small piece of a person, or like make contact with someone, make eye contact with someone, and then expose yourself to small areas of the environment, and then your comfort with that will grow. It kind of depends exactly what you mean though with SE inferior. Okay. Is there a golden pair to leadership management? Is there a preferred type? How much does your personality type impact the role? So are you talking about what types are best at leading and managing? Well, there's 4 types that are most like the in charge types. Those are the ENTJ, ESTJ, ENFJ, and ESTP. Those ones have the communication style that is more directive and leadership oriented. I think most anyone can be a leader to some extent if you're willing to take responsibility and solve problems and you're good with people. Then I think you can do that pretty well. It depends what kind of leader though, because there's leaders who are starting something new and building a new vision towards something, and then there's leaders that are more about maintenance. Can we maintain the quality of something? Can we not necessarily start something new, but maintain quality. I think that's a different type. Extroverts are more naturally comfortable with dealing with other people, but I think any type can be a leader. I think people can attach self-esteem to functions they value. Only problem is when that function isn't doing well, then they hit bottom. That's an interesting idea. So like with our hero function, if we're proud of our hero function, we can attach a sense of self-esteem to that. That's probably true. I think that's right, actually, Mercer, because like when I'm using my inferior function, can be like real up about, I'm conquering my weakness, and then as soon as I fail, it's like, into the pit. Sometimes. How can I be certain whether someone is an ISFP or ESFP? Which of those is more direct in their speech? More direct. Um, I would say an ISFP can be a little more direct if they're developed into their NI child a lot. If you're Because they can aspire to become more executive like the ISFP. Both the SFPs can technically develop into a little more directness. Um, but I've seen ISFPs some of them can become a little more direct. Let's say something new. So something, if you're saying about a leader of something new, that's probably an ENFP or ENTP. Jung talked about those types who have extroverted intuition hero, which is all about ideation, coming up with new ideas. They spark new things. They spark the revolutions. They spark the new ideas. So they're usually someone who can come up with something new and then lead the initial bit of that charge. When a person is too comfortable and doesn't leave environment, what function may they be leading in? If they don't leave their environment, well, I think that's mostly an IJ thing, the ISFJ, ISTJ, INTJ, INFJ. That's for potentially different reasons. But I think when you have low SE and low NE combined, which all the IJs do, there's a fear of new places and there's a fear of the unknown. And when those combine, it can lead to some serious hermit behavior. Mercer says the ISFP can be more direct, or I think can come off more direct. Yeah, I agree with that, Mercer. That's a good point because the background orientation of them plus the responding can also be, they're pretty shy and they don't want to look, they don't want to look stupid. Then they might say less. Hello. Okay, now which one am I? You are, and I believe you're an ESFJ. ESFJs are also one of the starter types. So the ENTP and the ENFP, like I said, are two of the four starter types. ESFJs can be good at starting things. They usually start things, though, in relation to things that they have already known or already do, or that are already known to others. They make kind of smaller innovations. I think your situation is kind of unique. I think you're a pretty complicated ESFJ. Are you a fan of socionics? So, I don't know a lot about socionics. I've read a little bit of it. I didn't love what I read. I felt like it was repackaged MBTI stuff that made it more needlessly complex. However, socionics is responsible for the insight that all introverts are mislabeled. That's why they call like an INFP an INF lowercase j, because they lead with the decision making functions. So that's a powerful insight. And then the guy Gulenko Victor, he came up with the subtypes that Dario Nardi now has used with his book, and the subtypes are pretty profound addition. So I think there has to be some value there. What I've read so far with the technicalities, I wasn't super thrilled, but I think it's worth exploring. Grab the camera for a lamer edit. I don't know what that means. When trying to give advice on how looks or performance to an SE inferior, how should that be done without hurting their feelings or inspiring change? How to give advice to an SE inferior? Well, you can kind of mimic like an ENP, and an ENP, if they're like healthy and assertive enough, they will say when something kind of gives them the impression that's not something that they really want. So it depends what you're talking about with the SE inferior. If they're like making something, if they're making a piece of art or drawing or writing something, I think you can tell them pretty directly that there's certain pieces here that are not that you don't love. I think with SE inferiors, you have to get specific and always be encouraging about some of the things that they're doing right. I think that helps that helps relieve that insecurity with their inferior. But I think framing it in terms of your own experience helps the SE inferior um, kind of triangulate what's actually going on. If the SE inferior is healthy, that they'll want to improve and they'll want to fix whatever's not good. Can INTJs be good mechanical mechatronic engineer? I don't know what a mechatronic engineer is, but yes, INTJs can be great mechanics. I knew this INTJ guy who's like it was a administrative mechanic leader guy of like very complex stuff. They can be great with that. NI hero, TE parent, if they have a good understanding of it, they can be really, really good. Yeah, those yeah. I think we see the same thing, Mercer. The IJs are can be kind of shut-ins, unfortunately. Yes, agreed. All right, Theus. Tell me if I'm saying your name wrong. I think it's Theus. What was the last thing you learned about personalities that exploded your mind? Latest insight. Well, Mercer turned me on to Dario Nardi's subtype theory, which is pulled from socionics and kind of redone based on his research. I was, it was the last time I really felt like, oh, this is something, and I kind of just unconsciously have been applying it to people I know, and the subtypes. I think Nardi's subtypes are very intuitive, for the most part. So I've been enjoying that. I also read Ion again from Jung, and that book is kind of nuts, but there's a lot in there that is pretty crazy. He talks about like he's applying like astrological theory to history and saying he said that Jesus marked, as Christianity and the symbol of the fish is associated with Jesus, that his death basically marked the beginning of Pisces, and he became like the ram or the lamb that were sacrificed, which is like Aries. So Jung said he was the last Aries and the first of the Pisces. That was kind of crazy. I don't know what that really means, but yeah. You bet. Yeah, you can thank Mercer for that. He sent me the book. The subtypes are quite interesting, though. Yeah, I really think though if you're familiar with typing and you know the functions and the attitudes, the subtypes are really where the conversation needs to go at some point, because if you have been practicing this stuff for long enough, you will find any type and you see that okay, those two people are the same type, but they look totally different. How do you explain that? What's going on? I think subtypes have to be the next thing after that. Okay. Do you believe some types do get along together naturally? Yeah, so I do believe compatibility is real in terms of there's compatible functions, like an ENTJ and an INTP, and the golden pair, their hero functions and parent functions, child functions, communicate directly with each other. But there's another kind of compatibility too, which is um, it's it's more like shoulder to shoulder, and it's when if you're I don't know what type you are, but if you're like an ESFJ, and then you're with another ISFJ, but you guys rely on different functions, there's actually like you're making up more of a full personality between you two, and you can work together really well. So I get along really well with some ESTPs, with the ESTPs who rely more on like the SE and TI, and I rely more on NI and FE, for example. So even though we're not compatible in the original in the technical sense, there's space for each other, and then we can rely on our preferred functions, and together we can have more of a full picture. It's not exactly compatibility in a relationship sense, but types who are similar, when there's space for the other person's functions, can work really well together. Okay, do you believe some types don't naturally get along together? So taking that same idea, yes. For like an ESTP who relies on their NI and an INFJ who relies on their NI too, and by rely on, I mean their nurture, their environment has pushed them to rely more on that function, then there's competing space for that. And I do think the conflict pair is a real thing. So whatever that is for your type. It's basically the introverted, one of the types that use the same functions that you do, but the introverted variant. So like an INFJ and an ISTP, an ENFJ and an ESTP. Those conflict pairs, I think, are where the most potential natural conflict will exist. Can you do Bible character videos? So I plan to do that. I don't know how to say your name. Rhinoculosaurus. Bible characters, yes, I do plan to do that. I think that's a valuable thing to do. I'm deciding when and how to do it. But yes, I do plan to do that. If you have any requests for Bible characters, you can put them down. I do have a list of ones I want to make. Obviously, Jesus is very interesting. I'll probably do one on him eventually, even though it's a bit risky, but I actually think it's very valuable. Okay. What kind of content can we expect from you in the future? I don't know why I'm asking this, haha, but I'm really excited for what's to come. Love your take and explanations of typology. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, that's an ongoing conversation I'm having with myself. I'm about to release the demon video, which is the end of the archetypes, and that's kind of between the functions and the 16 types, and then the archetypes, and then the how to type videos. That's sort of the foundational layer. So I'm deciding what to do next. I think we need to go into some more of the depth psychology space where we talk about the multiple aspects of our personalities. If you're familiar with the four sides idea, that's an idea. I'm going to track into some of those depths. And I released a video on Jung's model, which is like a circle within a circle. Then we're going to use that to uncover some different aspects of our personality. There's still more technicalities to get to with the types, such as how the functions relate to each other. But I'm still deciding what is next. Jesus, INFJ or ISTP. X-Ray says that. I agree, he's probably a Templar or a NFJ STP. Okay, you said it's hard to read Jung. I have tried. Yes, Jung can be very hard to read. I don't recommend reading all of Ion if that's your first go with him. My favorite book by Jung is called Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Thus. I think that's a great book. He has an essay on there on type that is really good, and I thought was fairly easy to read. Some of Jung is like so dense, I have no idea what he's saying. Some of him is pretty intuitive. I second the Bible characters idea. Do Joseph, John. I've been reading up on his history, quite interesting. Okay, noted. Gideon's interesting as well. Cool. Yeah, let me know if some other ones. I think I'm gonna do. I'll probably do Samson. I'll probably do Job. I'll probably do Esther. In the ideal world, I would do these. Obviously, I'd have to do Jesus. I thought about doing an experimental one on Adam and Eve, which we'd have to grant from the beginning that you can't really know fully what types they were. I think you can make a good argument for what functions were involved, though. Which compatibility pairing for relationships do you think has the best long-term outcomes? If you're talking about intimate relationships, I do think that it depends. It depends what framework you're coming from, but CSJ called it like the bronze pair or the natural pair. I do think that one is most likely to be, like, if you look at couples who have been together for like 30 years and have kids and all that stuff, I think a lot of them are that kind of bronze pair, which is like an ESTJ and an INFJ, an ENTJ and an ISFJ. I think that one is the most common. I've seen a fair amount of golden pairs though, with long-term relationships. So I think compatibility is just one layer to it, but I think that pairing is what you'll find most often. Joseph and Genesis specifically. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, Joseph's pretty interesting. If you think about all he went through and all the suffering and the years and years of imprisonment and unjust accusations, and then he kind of just forgave people. Like, what kind of person does that? Would Satan be the unconscious personality of Jesus or the superego of Jesus? That's a great question. Um, hmm. I view them as separate theories. I think they're different types. I think they're I think the pattern is almost there with what I think Lucifer is, but that is an interesting prop proposition. Why is the silver pair so overlooked on? That's a good question. I have seen some silver pairs too. Two of my best friends are in silver pair relationships. I think the silver pair is a little bit milder. It's not as volatile or passionate. It is pretty stable. I would say. It strikes me as being more like not platonic exactly, but a little more like professional. So I think our in our Western world, our idea of love might compete a little bit with the silver pair. How does each type experience their flow state? Is it based on dominant function or interest based? Flow state. Well, I don't know how to answer that from like a sciencey way, but if you think about that Goldilocks zone of something, the balance between the challenge of something and your capability with it, if it's pushing your capability, but also not too challenging, I think that's going to bring about a flow state. So, for example, um, when you're I think it's like when your hero and your inferior are in some kind of synergy together. When your inferior can participate without being overwhelmed, I think that can bring about a flow state. I think it can be a lot of different ways can bring about a flow state. Okay, how does each pair experience? Okay, I just answered that. Do you think we can type a country race? I think you can type temperaments of a country and a race. Can you type a country as like one of the 16 types? I don't know. I think you can definitely type other attributes like um, yeah, I mean you could probably associate an overall quality with them, like an overall archetype. I think it's a little bit more consistent if you type like more of a temperament layer than an individual type. But I think for like America, we're pretty pragmatic. We're pretty much we're independent. Probably like an NTJ would be my guess. Um, it's an interesting question though. Do you believe certain types are rarer than others? Yeah, I think there's certain types that are rare. I mean, across the board, people think that INJs are pretty rare. I don't know. I think we don't fully know because many people can't agree on how to type anyway. But yes, I do think certain types are rarer. CSJ associates the U.S. with the Midwest and Australia as SPs, for example, and Japan as NTs. Sure, yeah. I mean, there's certain patterns there. I actually don't know about Japan with the NT. I think they're intuitive probably, but for example, like if you watch um, like Japanese movies or film, they seem very character focused and idealistic focused. I think it's almost an NF, at least their entertainment seems that to me. One way to type back to your question, Theus, about countries is typing them by their vices. So with the Enneagram, for example, if you look at like the deadly sins in the Enneagram, or I don't know if you know the Octagram has their own deadly sins too. I think America is definitely greed and gluttony combined. So do with that what you will, but I think typing through vices and then reverse engineering that is interesting. I thought he said US was SJ. Yeah, I think our rebellious roots is more of an NTJ thing. Maybe SFP or SSP, but I think if you believe that greed and gluttony are America's vices, that might give you a different conclusion. A lot of manga writers are INTP. That is true, Mercer. Can I help you with something? Let me think about that too. So I could probably use some help, but I'm not sure exactly what I am. Where I'm making a website, it'll be done soon, hopefully as soon as possible, and I'll be offering some typing services to begin with, and then some stuff after that. But I'll think about it. I appreciate the offer. Um, so I'm sorry to bring it up again, but it's on my mind. Some famous couples such as PewDiePie and Marzia, or Zendaya and Tom Holland, are silver pairs based on CSJ. They don't seem professional. What do you mean they don't seem professional? Because I'm not as familiar with PewDiePie and Marzia, but Zendaya and Tom Holland's, when they interact with each other, to me the quality of those interactions feels a little more professional. Like if it's still an intimate relationship, it's not going to be like workplace professionalism, but it's giving each other space, things like that. Yeah, I did say that, and I do believe comparatively that silver pair is a little more. They act toward each other a little more professionally. I actually agree with you, Mercer. I don't think Holland is an INTP. I think he's an ENTP. I would agree. But I think he's developed into his SI, into his dutiful nature, which makes him look like an INTP. Bronze pair or golden pair for long term relationship. Um, well, the bronze pair is probably more common for a long term relationship. There's too many conflating factors there to like get real specific, but overall, like I said a minute ago, if you look at all the old couples who are like been together for a while and have kids and stuff like that, I think a lot of them are um, bronze pair. Not all of them, but why the name redemptive psych? What do we need to repent of? That was a name. I was talking to one of my mentors a while ago, and I was talking to him about this, and he actually came up with that name, and I was like, that feels right. So redemptive psych, through it's more of a perspective of um, using the psychology, using the personality types in a new, more redemptive oriented way, as opposed to just like self improvement and self development. I think that's important too, but it's a perspective of spiritual integration. Personally, I bring God into that conversation a lot. So that's it's more of an orientation of, set your mind on things above using personality sphere. It's not intended to be like you need to repent of this or that necessarily. Unless you do need to repent. Yes, if that's the case, then perhaps this is the place. I guess to go further with that, I don't think that any self development or self improvement strategy is going to save you. Like, you see people who idolize a self, all this the influencers who teach them how to save their own life. Basically, that's what it boils down to. How can you improve to such a degree that you don't need anyone else? That's kind of the spirit that I see behind many of the influences out there. I don't believe in that. I don't believe a person can save themselves in a technical or in a metaphysical sense. I think they can help themselves with some of those strategies, but it's not going to. True transformation, I think, lies beyond the realm of our own will, our own capability. So I suppose the channel name is also, for me, a commitment to that belief that no advice I can give you or no information about the types is totally going to transform the deepest part of yourself. It can heal and fix a lot of other things, but it's not necessarily going to, it's not going to fix the thing that's beyond your ability to fix. I'm in a silver pair relationship and don't feel that way, but perhaps we are mistyped. That's the one I'm conflicted with. Okay. Okay. Paul Marie, can you give me some more information of what types are involved and why you don't think it's professional? I need to know what you mean exactly. How do you relate to the last video of the 4 extremes? Okay, so that's a good question, too. So Jung made the argument, which is kind of disturbing in Ion, that basically the devil is the disassociated, repressed portion of divinity. I don't really believe that. So I don't know exactly how to answer your question, because if you apply a model of 4 to God's character, then you're saying that Trinity doesn't exist, which is risky to say. So I don't know exactly. I do think that the feminine aspect of God, I do think that the feminine aspect of God is real, is true, and is not talked about, because he said he created human beings in the image of him, and he created female and male. So I think there perhaps is a hidden feminine aspect of God that's not being acknowledged or talking about. It's a good question, too, and I mean it's right on the money with like how do you apply that to God's nature. I don't know. I think about that a lot. I'm not totally sure. Some in Golden Pair also said, what is going on? Okay. How can I tell what subtype I am as an ENTP? I believe in Enneagram I'm a 7 with social instinct, counter gluttony. Yeah, so every ENTP I've met, maybe like I'll say 80% of them I've met are probably 7s on the Enneagram. Subtype, well, so Mercer turned me on to Dario Nardi's more recent book on the subtypes. I would try and get your hands on that or look it up. There's 4 subtypes: dominant, creative, normalizing, and harmonizing. And it's actually related to a theory about hormones that, for example, like dominant types, whether man or women, have more testosterone, things like that. So if you're more, how do you interact with other people? How do you interact with the world? Are you a contrarian? Do you push away? Do you try and fit in? Now, there's our nature that an ENTP is naturally more contrarian, but there's the nurture aspect too. So I would get a hold of that book if you can and look into it. Maybe there's a video he made on it. What's your thoughts on Buddha type? I have a feeling he's INFJ, but I need to sit down and go through it. Yeah, I know CSJ thought he was an INTJ. I've always had a hard time thinking of him as an NI hero. It's possible because of NI heroes' propensity to get attached to things and that being a root of suffering for them. To me, though, if he really sat under a tree for 40 days or however many days it was, that seems like background to me. That seems like SI child to me. I would still tend towards like INFP. I need to go through it as well. I did take a class on Buddhism a while back, but I'd have a hard time thinking an INJ could be so still. Ion is a crazy book, but very interesting read. Lots of NE. Yeah, it is pretty crazy. He spends like 100 pages talking about the religious symbolism of a fish. And that's a hard 100 pages to get through. There's some interesting stuff there. If you do read Ion, I'd recommend the first 4 chapters and then chapter 12, which is a very long chapter. It's still very metaphysical, but that middle section, you don't necessarily need to read. Hey, John. Hello. I'm an Enneagram 3. Okay. I was typed INFP and him INFJ by CSJ. Our relationship has been great for years and it feels like a perfect match. When I hear the takes of typology on Silver, it usually confuses me because it doesn't fit. Okay. Um, so pomegranate, you think you guys don't act professionally with each other. There's more of a natural flow. There's more professionalism. Is that what you're saying? And then I would also ask, okay, how do you act when you're around other people? Like, do you embarrass each other when you're around other people as a way of making fun of them, or do you protect each other when you're around other people? I think the professionalism is usually a little more external with the silver pair. Like, how do you guys interact as a pair around other people? I was typed INTJ by CSJ, ENFP by my BF, and ESFJ by a friend who's pretty knowledgeable. I see. You've been all over the place then. INTJ, ENFP, and ESFJ. Okay. You're an Enneagram 3. Okay. Let's see. ESFJ. I would be very surprised for an ESFJ to be a 3 if you are really a Enneagram 3. ENFPs and INTJs can both be 3s. ENFPs are more likely to be 3s. ENFPs are very likely to be either 7s or 3s on the Enneagram. What type do you think is Spider-Man? Spider-Man is definitely an SFJ or an NTP. Is it because of TE? Kind of. Yeah, you will rarely find a 3 who's an FE user. TEs usually involved with that. ESTJs and ENFPs dominate the 3s, in my opinion. ENTJs too, somewhat. Spider-Man, I'm not sure. It depends which version you're talking about. Like, I think Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was more of an INTP. But SFJ, NTP. I haven't read the comics. I haven't read the original, so I don't know what he is in there. I suspect he's one of those 4 types, though. My friend who typed me Enneagram 3 was using the instinctual variance. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember all the details of the variance, but I have seen patterns with the 3s, ENFPs, and ESTJs being 3s. Do you believe a parent can be the same type as their child? Yes, I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's very too quick to say that they can't be. It's too quick. I've seen it. Focus on looks. Okay. Yeah, focusing on looks, like as a function of that's more of a TE thing. How do I come across? But it's also a little SE or NE too, depending. That's the perceptual version of looks, and the judgment version of looks is the TE. Do you believe in vibe typing? Kind of. You have to be careful with vibe typing. I sort of type that. I type primarily via perception, like how my perception functions interact with that person, and then I utilize the typing vectors to verify it. I have to quality control with the typing vectors because I use that secondarily. I think you could vibe type down to a certain amount of types, but once you get more specific, you got to be careful not to just rely on your vibes. Okay. What type do you think is the most masculine and which most feminine, and why? Masculinity and femininity is confusing because you have to take into account like nurture and subtypes. But if you're asking just in a general sense, I think ENTJ men can be very dominant. ENTJ men and ESTP men, I think, are I don't know. They're in different ways. But if you're talking about like an alpha, like a leader, that's more likely to be an ENTJ. I think if you watch the newer Planet of the Apes movies, the Caesar guy, I think that is a very healthy ENTJ. Okay. You know any fictional INFPs? Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of live action movies with actors who are INFPs, but anyone who's like a sage, like a kind of sage old man archetype, there's a good chance they're an INFP. What type? Okay, I understand. Do you believe in vibe typing? Yes, a little bit. I care a lot about my physical looks. Yeah, so that can be just SE too. No thing. SE, that can be SE critic, that can be SE inferior, that can be SE anywhere of the experience you give yourself through how you look. Technically, any users do that too because they want to look desirable to other people. What's funny is that ENP women often wear a ton of makeup, even though you would think that's like an SE hero thing. ENFPs and ENTP women, particularly ENTP women, can wear a lot of makeup and they look like SE heroes, but they are not necessarily. From Theus, quick comment, I like your videos a lot because concise and to the point. Other channels are very informative, so I appreciate your directness. I feel you speak clearly. Thank you very, very, very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to do sections of them where I keep some of the videos shorter and then some longer. I do plan eventually to do much more in-depth videos that may be quite long, but thank you for your comment. I appreciate that. Do you believe in visual typing? Yes, I do. Again, it's similar to vibe typing. I don't think you can rely on that 100% because it'll give you an impression, and the impression is true information, but what you do with the impression can lead you to mistyping very easily. You have to be aware of subtypes. You have to be aware of which functions their personhood is developed into. For example, if you're picking on, like, I've picked up on traits like, okay, that has to be an SFJ, but which one? And don't assume that you know which one just because they remind you of an ESFJ. ISFJs developed a certain way can look like ESFJs. So yes, visual typing is a real thing, but don't use it just by itself. Use it with some typing vectors if you really want to be accurate. Does each type really have physical characteristics? Can we just type based on how seeing a person is physically? Okay. Yes, I think they do have different traits, Theus, but again, based on their development, if you have an ENTP who's developed way into their SI, they're going to start to look a little more like an SFJ or an STJ potentially. So again, you can't just rely on that in my opinion, but yes, I do believe there are real visual things there. And a lot of the TE users don't like to hear that, particularly the INTJs, the TE parents, because there's no research on visual typing. I don't even know how you would research that exactly because no one can agree on how to type people. But yes, I 100% believe that there are traits in common with types who are the same type or similar types. But I'm bad at fashion. What does that mean you're bad at fashion? No thing. Do you think you're bad at fashion? Do other people think you're good at fashion? Okay, from X-Ray, my dad is an ENFJ, my mom an ISTJ. Okay, older sister ESFJ. How can this affect my nurture? They're all affiliated and I'm an ENTP. X-Ray, I need more information with that of like how they're developed, what functions they're relying on. I would say most likely that's going to push you to develop more of the FE and SI functions where you become more focused on being dutiful, being reliable, and not as much as being, out there changing the world with your systems. So ENTPs can't help but do that a little bit. So I'd say most likely if you're in an affiliative environment, it's going to develop more affiliative traits, the dutifulness, the social ability with SI inferior and FE child. I think the most important aspect of looks to me is being fit. Okay. So that seems like an SE function to me as relates to your own awareness. So it doesn't mean you have to have SE in your ego, but it could be SE critic of being very critical of how you how fit you are. Now, for nothing, question for you, with being fit, is it like an anxiety of like, oh, people are going to reject me if I'm not fit, or is it more like a criticism, like, oh, I'm just not putting in the work to be fit. I need to kick my own butt and get in shape. What is the energy attached to that for you of you wanting to be fit? I want to look desirable to other people with my own idea of desirability. Sad saying said that. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like an extroverted intuition statement. I don't know how to dress. My boyfriend says he's going to help. Okay. So nothing that sounds like some SI statements to me, introvert sensing statements. So the impression I'm getting from your comments though is that there's a certain obliviousness about um, dress. If it is obliviousness, it's probably lower SE and higher SI. If it's you being really critical of yourself and afraid to fail about it, that's probably more extrovert sensing. Okay, that's fair. Don't want to blow up like a balloon. What do you like most about INTPs? Thu says. Um, INTPs, there's a combination of not only the loyalty and the attentiveness, but they really like, they don't shame you and they give you space to kind of be how you want to be, just as they want to have space to be who they are. The NTPs give you a lot of space to be who you are and who you want to be. The ENTPs can have a harder time with that it's affecting their experience. The INTP is just so like kind of down for whatever, and I feel very comfortable around INTPs usually. What types do you believe are the rarest? Um, so I don't know exactly. It probably is the INJs, but I have seen a fair amount of INJs. I think there's more INJs than people think. I think INFPs are more rare than people think. Um, so I think the SJs are less common than people think. I think ENFPs are also a little less common than people think. So it's probably one of the INJs X ray, but I don't know for certain. I need a bigger sample size. I need thousands of people before I would be willing to comment on that. What do I think about INFPs? INFPs are fascinating because they can rise to positions of power and influence and leadership, even though you might not think that from how they look on the outside. They can be very influential. They can be great administrators. Actually, they can be great leaders. I'm very fascinated by INFPs for that reason, or at least for those reasons. I think they struggle to come to terms with their real intentions and motives at times, being willing to face themselves to some of their darker aspects. I think they struggle with that. You talk too much about your body image. I noticed over Discord as well. My boy claims to be an INFJ, but being, I'm, I'm not sure being completely honest. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to know with that stuff. Know things, especially if it's virtual. Especially if I don't know if you guys meet face to face online. Do you think certain types have a propensity to a certain mental illness? For example, Asperger's, the INTPs, or histrionics for T users? That's a hard question because once you ask that question, then you ask, okay, are those actually real things or are those just traits of a type? I think certain types are more likely to be diagnosed with things, but then you really have to ask, okay, is that condition actually real or is someone just picking up on that person being different without realizing it? So, yeah. What type is Trump? Trump is an ENTJ, one of those natural in charge leadership types. Um, so, yeah. ENTJ. ENTJs are the best. ENTJs are the best natural leaders, particularly of other people, particularly of when they have to make a lot of decisions. We call all the time with camera, so it's not like being with him. Okay, so you have some visual feedback. Yeah, nothing. You strike me as an introverted sensing user. That's just my impression. But you strike me as that. I think the rarest might be INP and ENJ. Mercer says. Um, okay. They're certainly among the more rare. Yeah, like Mercer, I think you would agree. I think that the INJs are a little more common than people think, but I still think they're pretty rare. I think ENTJs are pretty rare too. But I also think a lot of ENTJs are mistyped, as I assume you would agree, Mercer, that they mistype as all kinds of stuff. ESTJs, ESFJs. I've seen a lot of ENTJ women mistype as ESFJs or ESFPs. He doesn't remind me of you or anyone I have ever met. That's interesting. Okay. Have you thought about ESTP? No, no thing that might be interesting type to explore. I don't know if he's that's what comes to mind. ESTPs, for example, can come across quite introverted in one-on-one settings. I'm not saying that's what he is. It's just something to consider. Okay. When trying to get the trust of others, would you recommend to focus on which slots? So trust, Thus, is critic. It's I think trust and respect go hand in hand. So it's I think it's all about the critic at that point. Now, yes, you don't want to like do bad things to someone's inferior function. But trust and likability are different. If you want someone to like you, it's like giving space to the hero, giving validation to their inferior. But the critic, trust and the critic, to me, are like one to one. Deal with someone's critic, earn the trust of their critic, acknowledge their critic, help them explore their critic. And I think that will help you gain some trust. NFJs seem quite rare. Does TE or TI care about being believed? Well, I think it's more TI cares about being believed, because TI users have a harder time explaining why they think what they think. So they want someone. I feel this way a lot. I want people to be. It depends the context. Like here, I don't mind being less believed, but if I put in care into my thinking, I want people to respect that I put care into my thinking, and I can't always explain the reasons why I think that. So I would say TI users care a little bit more about being believed by default, but INFPs can do that too, and ESTJs. INJs way more common. Maybe I think INTJ women are more common than people think, because that was originally stated as the rarest type. It was like INTJ women and INFJ men. I do think at least INTJ women are a little more common than like 0.5%, which is what they said. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ENTPs. Probably not a TI parent. Okay. Okay. Yeah. That can also be low extroverted thinking, like an INFP or ISFP. They can also exhibit that of TE inferior struggles to explain their reasoning at times, though they tend to be pretty good at it compared to some of the TI using types. But they have that feeling where they have something to express and it never comes out the way that they want it to. Are INTJs or ISFPs more impulsive, where they talk before they think kind of way? I think ISFPs are more impulsive. INTJs with any nemesis, they're their anticipation of what's to come is so negative and cautious that they may be quite careful about that. Now, SI demon can certainly go on impulsive binges, but I think that's a little different than what you're talking about. I think ISFPs are prone to oversharing a lot. Sharing both the IFPs at times share way too much. So I'd say ISFPs are more likely to be impulsive. Yeah, I know I know how that feels. No thing, because you have a sense of what you're seeing and why you might be right, but to articulate that is really difficult. I've learned to let sleeping dogs lie with that. Of if I'm being reliant on other people believing me to feel good about what I think, I misplace I've externalized my sense of worth. What do you Why do you think you like to teach about personalities? Theus says that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those instinctual things. I think I talked about this a while ago, but it's just one of those things I feel gravitated towards. Like it's part of my purpose, at least for the time being. I think for most of us, the things we're drawn to, if it's like a true compelling draw, it's probably related to things we've been through, the difficult things we've been through, the trauma we've experienced, and then finding certain things as a solution or as a way out of that. I think personality types is a way for that, for myself. So I also believe that our world, one of the biggest problems with our world is people don't know who they are, they don't know how they operate, they don't know why they operate, they don't have understanding of themselves, therefore they don't have grace with themselves or with other people. So that self-awareness is a huge issue, a lack of it with our world, I believe. So that's kind of part of my mission here, to bring more of that. I'm gonna call it R. Kelly 60-minute interview when he got upset and said, "You don't want to believe the truth," as an INFP. That does seem like a TE statement. People know me for being opinionated. LOL, opinionated. INTJ women scare me. Yes, they can be a little scary. My entire childhood, I had to witness the most horrific relationship between my parents, ENTP and ISFP. That made it clear to me what I want and don't want. Would that fit the silver pair being professional? You're saying, would that fit the silver pair being professional when you're saying that your partner exhibits what you do want and things that you don't want? Not necessarily. I mean, the way you're describing it, of like, I want to avoid these things and I want these specific things, that's sort of a professional way to approach a relationship. It doesn't mean you have to be. I need some more information. Palma agreed. Fair. All right, how long have we been going? 80 minutes. Okay. We'll probably go for another 20 minutes or so. So, do you have any more questions? Share them away. I also want to know from you guys. You had mentioned the Bible characters. What kind of content do you think would be most helpful to you, or what kind of content is most interesting to you? I want to know that. I'll take that into consideration. I can't promise anything, but I do want to know either what you think would be helpful or what's been the most engaging content for you so far. There should be a personality assessment for kids in school, and they should be allocated to classes according to that. We would create something great people. I think there's a part of that should be there, Sad. It depends like how old they are and things like that, but I don't think our education system accommodates individual differences very well. It would need to be quite a huge overhaul with that. I think that's something where like private schooling and homeschooling can start with, can be pioneers with that. It's going to take a while before it stretches to the public institutions. Most engaging one to me was your last video on INFJ being manipulated easily. Okay, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I want to get into some more content that discusses situations like that, or potential issues with some of the types. Interests. How to deal with different personalities in the workforce. How to cater to different needs. Yeah, this is a great question. This is one of the huge elements of how to test if type is actually useful or not. First, it always comes down to knowing what your type is, how you work, and then learning how to type the traits of other people. Now, with workplace, there's the DISC test, which is like how people work. Then there's a version of that DISC test with Linda Behrens that organizes the types into DISC-like attributes. So 4 of the types are going to be like more in charge, oriented, willing, can handle more responsibility more comfortably. Some of the types, and the other 4, the other 4 types after that are good at starting things, coming up with new ideas, starting new initiatives. They can be consulted potentially for feedback, for new ideas. 4 of the types are more quality control, who you want to limit what's on their plate because they put a lot into the quality control of what they have. And then the background types, the behind the scene types, another 4 types. They want to be supportive. They don't want to be out in the open, but they do want to be recognized. So that's a big question for the workplace, but I think it starts with seeing some of these broad behaviors of what these groups of types may need. I might do a series on that in the future because that's a great question. I like associations between systems, such as explaining more about the numerology of number 4 and all the systems related to that, understanding more about the metaphysical structures. Yeah, numerology is interesting. I don't know enough about it to really do a series on it, but I do want to do some more metaphysical ties. I want to do a spiritual gift series. I want to do a tie with the Enneagram and the 16 types, things like that. Do I believe in astrology, tarot, and numerology? Put me on the spot. I think there's something to astrology. I don't know to what extent. I think its utility, how it's used, is kind of occultic sometimes, but I think the universe is certainly designed in a way that it, as above, so below, does exist. So I think there's too many coincidences with astrology for it to be totally wrong. Tarot and numerology, I don't know, Thus. I think there's probably some true aspects to them. I wouldn't know exactly what. I know a little bit about them, but not a lot. John, to the silver pair thing, you said you need more info, but what info? I kind of lost track of it. You were talking about, like, we were discussing whether the silver pair is truly professional or not, whether they're professional with each other. And I had said, you seem to think that you guys are not professional with each other, but that professionalism is also how you interact when you're around people. So do you and your partner or spouse, whoever, when you guys are around other people, do you pair together as more professional? Do you embarrass each other easily in public around others as a way of connecting, or is it more like respecting the other person, not wanting to embarrass them in front of others? That can be a sign of more of a silver pair. I think Bible typing would be great. The Bible is my expertise, so I'd love to see that mapped out. Okay, it seems like a lot of you are saying that. Thank you, Mercer. Yeah, maybe I'll start with that. I've been meaning to get to that. I think it's worthwhile. So, thank you for that. Does TE or TI have difficulty with believing people too easily? Depends what you mean by believing people. If it's too much trust in people, I think that those TI childs have too much trust in people often. I think TE users believe sometimes too easily. That's the credulity characteristic that TE users, basically everyone except for the TE parent, can be a little credulous. So I think TE users believe information too easily from other people at times. But it's also can be great to talk to them about that. So because they're like easy to get into conversations about ideas with. They don't like push back on every little thing. INFPs tend to be literal and quick to believe what other people say, according to CSJ. So yes, if the topic being talked about is something that they're familiar with and something that they already believe. If you bring in an outside perspective for an INFP, something that threatens their belief, they may treat it the opposite way of being so close-minded to it that they won't even consider it. They need, if something is outside their belief system, they need a lot of different reference points to confirm what you're saying. before they'll accept it. So it depends what information is being shared and how they interpret that in context of their own values. Okay, it's like someone will say something is true and I will believe it, but I believe too easily. Yeah. So that seems like TE, no thing. A lot of the impressions that you have given me over this Q&A strike me as FI and SI, or TE and FI. That's my impression I'm getting from you. You strike me kind of like an introvert, kind of like a responding type, possibly a background type. It's definitely more about respect. It's true that we don't have a childish energy around other people, but we do when we're alone. It depends if embarrassing is a bad thing or not. Like, I think people embarrass each other as a playful way around others, and it's not malicious. So you could be a silver pair with that information. It can also be like a benefactor. My wife and I are a benefactor. We have that same kind of a similar quality to that pomegranate. TE, yours just cooked, man. Thanks, John. Thank you. Appreciate that. My partner lets me be goofy. Nice. Yeah, I get that. Okay, Mercer was talking about, I think CSJ doesn't explore why INFPs will take in information. It is NE that makes them more liable with the combination of TE. NE is very open to ideas. Yes, that is a good point. It's like any parent, if they're using it, they like, I have to be responsible and consider that might be a possibility and that might be true. So it opens up the possibility for listening. However, if they're being really responsible and like limiting how far they're going to go with that idea, it can actually protect their information. They can be open to listening to it without having to like believe it right away. But I agree, NE plus TE can be the most open-minded, even if they don't want to be open-minded. I really don't have a moral judgment on CSJ. I don't know what that means. The new system and the people are cray-cray. Are you talking about the typing system? Or what are you talking about? Agreed with Mercer. Yeah. He does say that TE is generally open-mindedness. Yeah, extrovert thinking users are open, but they have to, there has to be a level of trust there first. Like, they will protect themselves from any voice because they know they can be kind of credulous, that if they don't like value you, if they don't care about you, then they may not listen to you. It's not as simple as just all information goes into their head. He threw away the type grid. Really, I didn't know that. I made SD and UD into a whole thing. Okay. Yeah, I used to work with him a while ago. I don't anymore. I didn't know that happened. People discriminate against each other and others based on UD SD. I see. Yeah, I didn't know. It sounds like a bad idea to throw away all the vectors. Okay. I'm thinking about depending on people's experience, they might lean more into brown silver. Yeah. As I said, I've also seen more golden pairs than I thought would be likely. I've been watching for a couple of years now. Everyone should have a moral judgment on CSJ. Okay, Deuce asked, do you think there might be a hidden cognitive function, something we haven't discovered yet, or something along those lines? A hidden cognitive function. So not directly Theus. I think a system that goes from 2 to 4 to 8 with extroversion, introversion, and then thinking, feeling, intuiting, sensing, and then the 8 functions. I don't think there's a missing one, but I think there are qualities of combined functions that are new. For example, Mercer and I were talking about this. With the NFJs, when you combine NI with FE, if they're using it simultaneously, it might create a kind of synthesis of a function. Whereas with the NTJs, if you combine TE with NI, it creates a synthesis of a new function. So that and by that way, 8 functions can go to what 16 or 32 or 64 synthesis impressions of a function. But I think what you're asking, is there a fundamental function that's not there? I think at that point you have to talk about other aspects of the human, where you think about the role of consciousness and will, perhaps sin nature as related to the functions that don't create a whole new function, but create a different expression of it. So I'm sure there's more mystery there, Theus, but I don't think there's like a literal like 9th function or 10th function. The other way, I was trying to get that. Yeah, I mean, it depends what you mean about judgment. Pomegranate, I think if you condemn other people, it prevents you from understanding why they are the way they are. And then it subjects you to that judgment too. But yes, certainly protecting yourself is not important. If you don't get close to anyone, I'm probably one. Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. Pomegranate, that's the boundaries of what that person did was wrong. Now, then you decide whether you're going to tolerate that or walk away or call it out. I agree. New functions: B, bi and B, introverted BS, and extroverted B. I greatly appreciate the video. If I can't understand, Yeah, I've been thinking about that Mercer. I think I want to do something on that. How NI and FE together look versus NI and TE, because as we had talked about, when people think of NI, they automatically assume systematic in terms of how they understand NI. It's like, what are the steps to get to what I want? That's TE plus NI. But the NI users that don't have TE don't really operate that way. Not as much. I think Pomegranate, the difference is judging a behavior versus condemning a person. I think people are more complicated than just to be condemned. I'm not sure if that's what you're saying or not, but yes, many behaviors are toxic and bad and destructive, right? Also, you and I isn't selfish. Yeah, I think NI's proclivity to selfishness is higher, Mercer. But I agree, it's not selfish inherently. Just as NE isn't unselfish, isn't altruistic. Right. All right. Couple more minutes. I'll do a couple more minutes. Get in any more questions if you want, or any other comments or insights. Again, if you guys want any content you're most interested in or think would be most helpful, I consider consider it. So please comment if there's something on your mind. Oh, I see what you're saying, Mercer. NI plus FEs, he seems less selfish. I agree with seem that way. It's not always that way. NIFE can manipulate through a back door of like, um, by helping you, you're going to give me all the things that I want. That can be kind of a dark way of using it. I agree that NI plus FE is more altruistic focused. Though altruism can be, a shadow of selfishness. Congrats on the subs. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think Ni plus Fi is most prone to selfishness. Not all selfish. I mean, there's good and bad things to being prone to that, though. I don't trust you. Mr. Winnie, I felt you're doing a terrific job. The amount of videos and quality is amazing. Thank you so much, dudes. I really appreciate that. Thank you. All right, early morning for you over there. Wow. Yeah. Fair. How do I think a relationship between an ISTJ father and INFJ son would bode? I think those are the most respective types of my brother and father, but I'm not 100% sure on it. ISTJ fathers, if they're, it depends if they're more dominant, if they're more aggressive, if they're more controlling of like, you need to act like this, you can't do that. Or if they're more supportive, it depends. I think overall it can be a pretty good relationship. ISTJs usually struggle to give the type of freedom that an INFJ really needs because the ISTJ is worried about that. So, but overall, those are usually pretty good. Yeah. Antinatalist. Wow. Okay. All right, guys. I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate your support. Appreciate you stopping by, and we'll probably do one of these again in the near future. Again, if you have other content or stuff that you think would be good or helpful, you can comment on a video. I'm open to exploring more ideas. And if enough of you want something, I'll likely get to something like that. So hope you guys have a great night. Thanks again, and I'll see you around. Bye, guys.